Hey everyone and welcome back. So in today's video we'll look into how we can implement service discovery with Consul. Now as we are discussing that for the service discovery in Consul there is a central registry that is maintained, and this registry contains information about all of the services. So not only it contains information about the services but also the details related to the IP addresses and the port where the service is running. Now, when you discuss about the service discovery, there are three key areas in the overall process of implementation. First is registering a service, second is finding a service, and third is monitoring a service. So only if you get all of these three areas right will you be able to implement the right service discovery for your organization. And the overall implementation is quite simple. So let's go ahead, and in today's video we'll be focusing towards the first two steps, which is registering and finding, and in the later videos we'll be discussing in great detail about the monitoring services as well. So step 1 is registering a service. Now one of the main goal of a service discovery is to provide a catalog of all the available service, something that we have already discussed. Now, one of the question that comes from this diagram is that how does the Consul registry know that there are two services that are available, and that too the two services are running on following IPs and even on a specific port if required. So that happens via a service definition file. So what we need to do is we have to write a simple service definition file to declare the availability of a service on a specific node. So this can be better explained with this diagram where you have a registry and you have a messaging system which is running on a specific server. So via a service definition file, the Consul agent which is running on the node will inform centrally about some of the information of the service. So first information is can be my name is messaging-service. Second information can be I run on port 80, and third information can be my IP is 172.168.0.10. And once the Consul agent that is running on this messaging system node informs via the service definition file, then the information is stored in the central registry. So as we are discussing, after you have written a service definition file which can contain the following information like name, port and others, Consul agent will communicate the information with the cluster so that the service is registered, and within the registry you can have something like the name of the service as well as the IP address, and if you have specified the port in the service definition, you will even have the port. Now once the service is registered, it is important to know the details about that service as part of the service discovery. Now one of the primary query interface for Consul is DNS. So what you can do is the DNS runs on port 8600 in Consul. So you can send a dig request to the IP address, and the name here is messaging service or any service name that you have used, followed by .service.consul. And as we had seen in the demo, the Consul will return the appropriate IP address and even the port where the service is running. So these are the two steps. Let's go ahead and implement it from scratch and look into the overall steps that are involved. So today's architecture will keep it very simple. So we have two virtual machines here, Consul 01 and Consul 02. Consul 01 will host the Consul server, Consul 02 will host the Consul client. Now connecting to both the system via SSH, so we have a Consul 01 and Consul 02, and we'll start Consul in each of the system via the systemd. So let me in fact show you the consul.hcl file for easy reference. So for our server, this is how the consul.hcl file looks like. So here you have a server of true. We have given a node name of Consul server, the bind ADDR, the client ADDR, and so on. And even for Consul 02, let's quickly go to Consul D and let's look into consul.hcl file where you have a start join, bind ADDR and datadir. So within the Consul 01 node, let's quickly go ahead and start Consul. Let's also verify the status, and our Consul is active and running. And let's also verify the status in the Consul 02 node, and the Consul 02 is also active and running here. That's great. So this is the prerequisite before we start the service discovery implementation. Now, if you log into the Consul UI, under the service tab, by default, you will see that there is one service that is available. The name of the service is Consul, and if you open it up, it gives you the IP address where this specific service is running, which is 134.209.155.89. So the aim of today's video is to go ahead and create one more service, and we'll look into how are the overall steps that are involved here. Now, as we are discussing, one of the first step is registering a service. And in order to register a service, you need to create a service definition file, which in turn contains information like the name of the service, the port number, and so on. Now, creating a service definition is very simple. So this is a sample service definition for today's demo. Now, within the service here, you give the name of the service. So in this case, the name of the service is web. Now again, this can be messaging service and any other that you require. And then you also give the port where the service is running. So this is important. So that's the only thing. Again, this can be more detailed that we'll be discussing in the other videos step by step. But for today's video, we'll keep it simple. So this is a JSON definition. So let's go ahead and create it under the etc console.d of the Consul 02 node. So within the Consul 02, if I quickly do a pwd, we are in the etc console.d directory. Let's go ahead and create a web.json, and let me go ahead and paste the contents. Let's do a save. Now along with that, you can even validate the content. So when you do a Consul validate etc console.d, here it states that the configuration is valid. You can ignore the first line. Primarily it is showing because we have a file called as consul.hcl.bat, which was the original file under this directory. However, since the configuration is valid, things seems to be good. Now at this stage, you'll see that our web service is not appearing over here. So what we need to do is you can either reload the configuration or you can restart Consul. So the better way is to do a reload. So all you have to do is you have to run Consul reload command. So it states that the configuration reload is triggered primarily because we have a new configuration. And now within the GUI, you see that you have one service available. Now if you quickly open this up, it will give you the exact node where the service is running, which is 165.22.222.190, and it is also showing you the port, which is port 80. Now if you click here under the health check, it is basically showing you agent is alive and reachable. Now we'll be discussing more in detail about the health check, but do note that this is not the service health check. It is the agent level health check that is being shown over here. Now you also will have to do a service level health check. So for example, our Consul agent in this messaging server is working perfectly. However, our service is not working at all. So still, if you do not have the service level health check, it will not really show here. So that is the second step, but this is the default output that you'll see. Now, after the service is registered, second is finding the service. Now we were able to quickly find a service from GUI, but finding a service in an automated way is something that you can achieve with the help of DNS. So discussing about the DNS, Consul runs a DNS on the port of 8600, where you can go ahead and send the appropriate queries. So let's quickly look into it. Now within the Consul server node, if I quickly do a netstat-ntlp on the port 8600, you see that the Consul is listening, and this is the port where you go ahead and you send the DNS queries here. Now in order to do that, we'll need a utility of dig. So currently by default it is not installed. So let's go ahead and install the dig utility, which is part of the bindutils package in CentOS. That's great. So when you quickly do a dig, it gives you the output over here. So let me give you a basic syntax here. So when you do a dig, let's say kplabs.in, it basically shows you the IP address where the server is hosted, and it also shows you the type of record, which is a record. Now in a similar way, since we want to go ahead and fetch the information about the service, this dig command that we will run, we have to send this command on this custom DNS server that is running, which is running on the port of 8600. So by default, the DNS server in Linux is configured within the resolve.conf. So if you just run a dig, then it can take the default DNS server, but now you want to send it to a custom DNS servers here. So in order to do that, first thing is you have to run a dig followed by the IP address where the DNS is running. So let's say you'll specify localhost, then you specify the port. So the port is 8600. Then you specify the name of service. So the name of service is web followed by service.consul. So if your name of the service was database, then it would have been database.service.consul. Now if you run it, you will basically get the IP address where our web service is running, which is 165 and so on. Now as we are discussing, this is an A record which will only give you the IP address. Now you can also look into the SRV record where not only it will give you the IP address, but it will also show you the port where this service is running. And this is important because some service can run on 80, some can run on 8080 and so on. That's great. So I hope at a high level overview you understood the two primary steps of registering a service and finding a service. Now as we are discussing at this moment of time, since this service of web is running on this node, which is Consul02 on port 80. Now if you'll actually look within the Consul02 node, if you quickly do a netstat-ntlp, you will see that no process is associated with the port of 80. So if you send a request to this specific IP on port 80, that request will fail. So let's quickly try it out. So I'll say 165.22.222.190 on the port of 80. So you see, you immediately get a connection refused. So at this moment of time, our primary aim was just to register a service and finding a service. The next step that we'll be discussing is how we can add a monitoring to the service in a way that the Consul can tell us if a service is actually running or not within that specific node. So with this, we'll conclude today's video.